Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of BCS Community Connections. And today on the podcast, I've got a very nervous Cindy Soltis from BVCASA here in the Bryan College Station area. So we reached out to BVCASA and wanted to have them on the show to get an opportunity to really talk about what they do in the community. Really, up until this point on the podcast, we've pretty much had businesses, restaurants, people who are selling stuff, people who are trying to get customers in. And this is not one of those podcasts. This is more of a podcast talking about services that you guys offer in the community. And we're going to get into those and talk about it a little bit and kind of get into these services and how they're effective here in the community. But I think before we came on the podcast, we were kind of talking about, if we asked people locally, took 10 people off the street and asked, what is BVCASA and what do they do? I'd asked you how many people do you think would be able to identify what BVCASA is and what it does, and I think your answer was 1, right, out of the 10. And so that's really a good reason to have this podcast and have you guys on the podcast to be able to talk about those services so that people have an opportunity to understand that there's some things here in town, resources that are available to them to be able to reach back. So BVCASA, let's talk about the start of it a little bit. BVCASA has been around for 36 years?
36 years.
Okay. And you're like the wise Yoda of BVCASA there because you've been with BVCASA how long?
20 years.
20 years. So, initially we this whole deal, and Cindy is nervous as all get out because she was talking about, okay, Crystal was supposed to be here and I'm kind of filling in here. But, really what we were talking about prior to coming on air is we were talking about the idea that when you're passionate about something, you don't just well, I guess some people do, but you just don't gut out 20 years at a place and not have a passion for what it is that you've done or something that's kept you there for that long. And so what I'd like to talk about kind of first is let's talk about your background a little bit. Kind of tell me what brought you to BVCASA and what your role is there, what you've kind of seen over 20 years of BVCASA from then to now. And then we'll get into BVCASA and talk about some of the services and things that they offer here locally to be able to provide that information to our listeners. So tell me about how you came to BVCASA.
Okay, well, I was in the dental field, I guess, about 20 years, and then I went into the field of addiction, went to school and got my license and, applied for a job there. Addiction runs very deep in my family. I grew up with addiction and it's destroyed a lot of my family. So I went to school and applied at BVCASA and then was hired on and started my counselor internship and, did that and got my license. And I've watched the agency grow unbelievably in the last 20 years. But at this time, I'm the director of treatment and intervention services. So I also oversee the counselor intern program and among some other things. So I would say BVCASA's home and it's my heart.
Yeah, and so you wear the hats. That's pretty much a good way to kind of describe it. In 20 years, you've seen this evolution happen with BVCASA. And so we'll back up a little bit here for our listeners. BVCASA is a treatment center. Basically, I guess I don't want to butcher this. So if at any given point I'm off base here, make sure you let me know. But a treatment center, treatment program, preventative program, outreach program. There's a lot of stuff that kind of runs in under this umbrella. Basically for addiction, alcohol, drug addiction, mental health. Is that kind of wrapped up in there? I guess it is kind of wrapped up in there in the extent of kind of unpacking the things that people bring to you. But if I kind of hit that on the head, I'm fairly close.
Yeah, normally, we prevent, we intervene, and then we treat this disease of addiction. And it's from marijuana to alcohol to cocaine to meth to heroin. It doesn't matter what the drug is, we treat it. We have several programs. We have a prevention department that uses evidence-based curricula in the schools. Mm-hmm. COVID's kind of put a damper on that.
Yeah, COVID's done a number on just about everything here this year.
Yeah, pretty much. And then we have intervention. The first step is a person comes in for a screening or an evaluation, and they're either self-referred, referred by family, referred by probation, CPS, whoever.
Right.
And, one of our counselors does the evaluation to determine what they need, and then we make the referral into the appropriate program. So, gosh, we do so many things. We, like our intervention programs, we offer DWI, the 12-hour first offender. We offer DOEP, which is the drug offender education program. These are state-approved programs. Mm-hmm. If someone gets a DWI or a possession of drug charge, they would take these classes. If we evaluate someone and we determine they do not need treatment, but they need education, we have programs that we can at least educate them. So we would refer them into those. And then once they're evaluated, we evaluate the whole person.
Yeah.
So we're not just looking at substance abuse, we're looking at all their life areas. And then we make referrals to mental health treatment if they need that while they're in our program.
Yeah, you got to know their history. Because it's really probably the thing that's tied into why they're there, or at least, the unpacking of everything when they're in the programs probably leads back to that. So screening wise, walk me through if let's say I'm just at the end of my rope and I don't have any other place that I can kind of reach out to, or I'm done with burning all the bridges that I've burned in my life and everything else, and I show up at the doorstep of BVCASA. Kind of walk me through what that would look like. We talked about, I'm going to walk in. Is my first point of contact going to be you? Is it going to be a counselor?
The first point of contact would be our receptionist,
okay.
And then she would contact one of us. And then we would take the client back and do a screening,
okay.
or evaluate the client and see, what their problem is, what's going on.
Yeah. And then you can funnel them basically where they need to go, into whatever program that looks like. Because y'all offer more than just a drug addiction program as opposed to that. When we talk about the word addiction and you talk about the things that bring somebody into that avenue, it's not just as simple as we're just going to get you to stop. That's just not how that works, right? There's we were kind of discussing before we went on air that addiction really, especially in a family, addiction runs all of those veins, right? It's not everybody kind of in that family. You probably sit down and you're interviewing the family members and stuff, and they're like, well, he does this and he doesn't want to do this, and
if he would stop, I would be fine.
Yeah, our family would be great, right? And then as the unpack happens and you're kind of walking through that process, the realization becomes that there's a lot more propping that person up other than just a drug or an alcohol or whatever. They're being propped up by codependent family members. They're being propped up by habitual bad habits. I guess when I look at it, it's this idea that if I'm in a household with an addict, that my goal, if I'm one of the family members that's not the addict, is to keep the quiet, to keep the peace, to keep the whatever that looks like, so that I don't have to deal with the blow-ups, the drama, the things that all come along with that. So, and a lot of people kind of look at that and go, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. I could see people wanting to do that, but they don't realize the codependency that kind of happens in on that. It's maybe these trade-offs or bargainings, or, even in some, here's $20, man, just like.
Well, we always say there's an elephant in the middle of the room.
Yeah. So, this one doesn't hide, right?
We pretend it's not there, but we kind of walk around it.
Sure.
And then eventually we have to deal with it.
Yeah. And all of the recourse for that, the longer and longer this goes on, the more complicated it typically becomes.
Right. And the whole family needs help.
Yeah. So folks show up at BVCASA, you guys screen them through, work them through these funnels, and give them an opportunity to kind of look at programs that are available to be able to help them, to also be able to help their families. So, this is kind of one of those deals where if you're listening out there and you've got, somebody in your family that's struggling with an addiction process here, it's a process. It's not, oh, we just need to get this person fixed of their problem. It's, right. You're really kind of cleansing that whole entire landscape. I mean, it's everybody in the picture, right?
That's why we have parenting, and we also have family night. So family night, the family members can come and learn about the disease and learn how to take care of themselves despite what the addicted person's doing, because not everybody does recover. But, we have people that chronically relapse. We have people that get it the first time, and then we have people that die, So we want to teach everybody how to take care of themselves despite what's going on. But I also want to say that there's always hope. I mean, if someone calls BVCASA, one good thing is we are the only facility within probably 100 miles that is funded by the state.
Right.
So, anybody that has no benefits, and a lot of times by the time they get to us, they don't.
Yeah.
Like you said, they've burned every bridge.
Sure.
So, we can help them and get funding to get their care. And if they need an inpatient stay, we refer them to a program somewhere in Texas that has funding also.
Right. So I made a couple of notes on my little notepad here, and funding actually was one of the things that I made a note of. So we're talking about through the state being funded, Department of Criminal Justice, Department of State and Health Services,
which has changed now to HHSC.
Yeah, I tried to kind of spell that out. But yeah, if I said like I just messed it up on here. If I said it on here, most people probably wouldn't be able to drive that back to where it is. But also, it doesn't just stop there. You're also funded through the United Way. Mm-hmm. And through private donations. Mm-hmm. So this is not just an all-inclusive where people may be listening to this and just thinking, oh, okay, well, that's my taxpayer dollars going to fund something. It's a lot more than that. And it's more than that needed as well for the processes that you guys have to go through to get people well. And so these drives through the United Way that are kept here locally and funded here locally through BVCASA, the private donations that can be made directly to the programs. Earlier, I heard you when we were talking about, family members and everything else. This all, to an extent, starts in the home front, right? I mean, I would think that a lot of this can kind of drive backwards. And I was telling you before we came on that I've got a 9-year-old daughter, and you and I can probably flip back and remember 80s where it's just say no to drugs, and all of these
didn't work.
Yeah, all these programs, right? And while those were majorly funded national programs, not so much funded, I don't think, from the standpoint, to me, I guess now that I'm older and can look back on it, I see a lot of that funding being commercialized and really just, it's like everything else. You can put your kid in a red shirt and you can send them to school, and that don't mean they ain't going to do drugs. Even though it's red shirt, don't do drugs, make your promise and everything else. And those have been around for a long time, but we got to be honest in this situation. I mean, our country is facing an epidemic, and it's an epidemic on multiple fronts. It's not just the idea that we're sitting here saying no to drugs. I mean, alcohol is on the rise. All of these drugs, opioids, are on the rise. These are all things that continue to find a vein into communities, that continue to tear apart families, that continue to destroy people's lives. And I mean, literally all the way into 6 feet under the ground. And so this becomes an avenue where you have to be proactive. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, I'm imagining that people that you guys see and probably handle are more of a reactive. At that point, like, everything is falling apart and I'm here and I'm at my wit's end. I don't have any other options. And what do I do? And proactive on the backside is having these conversations. I got an opportunity to go on to y'all's Facebook page prior to sitting here with you and kind of looking that it's not daily, but you guys are putting up things where, and I mean, there were things on there that I'm like, man, I didn't even know this. Like, there's one on there that says, did you know that, what is it? An e-cig vape has 20 in the oil for the refill, has 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine in it. And again, this is something that's on the rise in younger people. It's geared, hate to say that, but it's geared towards younger people. We're going to flavor this thing and put it in nice little pretty packages and make it in these cute little pins and everything else.
It's advertised to kids.
Yeah, and now that's all great that cigarette sales may be dropping, but you're seeing this huge spike increase on the other side. And so again, these are all things that we're talking about, that avenue for BVCASA, that it's not just the idea that we're just going to give a program that's going to do alcohol and a program that's just going to be drug addiction. It's also nicotine. It's also the preventative, the early education, the early intervention. And I notice, again, one of the things that's in your statement on the website when you go in there, at the very top it says prevention, treatment, recovery. And so that prevention really is that early education stuff. It's not, you can't prevent it when somebody's on your doorstep and they've got track marks up their arm and they look like a skeleton walking. I mean, at that point, it's treatment time, and it's right. We've worked past prevention at this point. But for people who are listening out there, the parents like me that have a 9-year-old daughter that's going to ultimately be influenced somewhere down the road by the friends she keeps, by the places that she goes, by the people who we surround her with and who she surrounds herself with, these are all going to end up being factors in what's going to happen for her long term. Plus that involvement side. So in the preventative part, let's kind of key in on that. What would you tell parents in that early education part? What are things that they can be doing to help minimize the ideas that are going to come to those kids? It's not like, you just don't, I was in school. We've all been there, right? It's not like this stuff doesn't exist around you. And it's not like it's probably not going to come to your doorstep at some point to where you hope as a parent, I've made all the best decisions and told my kid to just say no. And hopefully they just say no. What would you tell those parents or things that they can be doing right now? Early stages, elementary kids, middle school kids, what can they be doing to help guide them into making good decisions?
Well, I think the first thing is connection. Parents need to know what their kids are doing. They need to stay involved in their life. Connection to school, connection to sports. And, we know that kids that are connected to their school in a positive way are less likely to, get involved with the wrong crowd and start using and all of that. But I think the most important thing is to know what your kids are doing, know where they are, talk to them.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
And working in an information age where we have electronic babysitters that we can just throw in front of a kid and that way we can do what we need to do.
Family
right?
of 5, all 5 are on their cell phones every night.
Right.
So that's a problem.
And maybe at that point in some of these families, the best interaction you get is, how was school today? And that's it. Oh, yeah. That's great. Let me go back and update my Facebook status. Or,
exactly.
That's if we're old. If we're younger,
eat dinner together, spend time, do family events, have movie nights. Keep your kids connected.
Sure.
Because if they're not connected at home, they're going to connect somewhere.
Yeah, and to that point, and again, you've been doing this for 20 years, so I'm going to imagine people have shown up on your doorstep who have a story. And the story for a lot of those folks goes back to that lack of connection, that lack of involvement, that lack of, however a kid sees that. Some kids see that and view that as direct love, right? It's just, I'm missing this. This wasn't given to me. This wasn't a part of my life. This wasn't a part of my family. And I looked for it somewhere else. Right.
And I think it's important, too, to set, healthy boundaries with your kids and be consistent. When I say be consistent, I'm also going to say be flexible. There are rules made to be broken.
Sure.
But families where it's just black and white and there's no gray, real rigid type families, addiction happens a lot more. And so I think, know who your kids' friends are, know who your child is, have conversations with your children. A lot of times, I go back to the story where I had an angry youth one time, extremely angry, but angry wasn't an okay feeling in his family. If you're happy, if you're happy and joyful, it's okay, but anger, sadness, none of that was okay. So he comes through the door from school, kind of kicks the door, storming in the house, and the mom screams back at him, what's your problem? Instead of, I see you're angry, did something happen? By validating that feeling. And, because we know, that when homes are kind of dysfunctional, there's all sorts of there's sickness of every level,
Sure.
But I also want to say, I think parents do the best they can with what they have, so you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah. That's a very valuable statement.
Right. You can't give away what you don't have. But once we kind of teach those parents, and work with those parents, they start seeing it too. That's why our youth treatment program has a family a family program that comes along with it.
Right.
Where we do educational sessions with the families and teach them, all about, because they're clueless.
Sure.
Literally, they don't understand, that maybe directing a statement to your child that you should or you need is attacking.
Yeah.
Instead of saying something like, boy, I'd really feel happy if you cleaned your room. Things like that. As simple as that sounds, that we tend to, constantly attack instead of communicate.
Right.
So communication's really an art, and we try to teach them communication skills between each other because they don't have that. So when addiction, when kids grow up with addiction in their home, then they're facing a double whammy later. Like we talked about earlier, I told you genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. Yeah. Let's look at genetically 60%. Usually it's about 60%. Well, that's not 100%.
Right.
If you have both parents addicted, you have a 60% chance to have addiction. But if you grow up in a somewhat healthy environment, that other 40% might really help you not go that route.
Yeah.
But nobody plans to get addicted. Nobody chooses this disease. People make a decision at one point in their life to try something, and it happens all the time. And if they have that chemistry, or they keep on putting the drug in the brain, the pleasure part of the brain changes. Yeah. The reward circuit changes. And that's why we have people that literally will buy crack before they give lunch money to the kids and those kinds of things, because they, their brain they need it to survive. Yeah. Addiction happens in the area of the brain where survival, or you taking your next breath.
Yeah. You feel like without it, you're going to die.
Oh yeah. I mean, and you are, your brain really is telling you that.
Right.
And that's why we know that people that have addiction aren't bad people. They're sick people that need treatment and need to get well, so
socially, the stigma behind addiction just in general. And there's so many things that are out there. You look at intervention as one of the first shows that kind of comes to my mind. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've caught myself just going, this is crazy. How does somebody get from this to this? But then to hear you talk about that DNA wiring, and it's almost like dynamite, and you're just lighting the end of that deal, right. And now it's on fire, and it's just a matter of time at that point. And I think that's valuable to understand, because most people outside looking in who don't live with an addict, maybe they're just not as familiar with what that looks like on a day in, day out basis. The stigma kind of associated with that is like, just quit. I don't understand why you just don't quit. Or he has no willpower. Well, I've found,
we heard that before.
Yeah. I've found myself making a comment to a family member of just going, well, just need to cut them out of your life. Let's make this thing real simple. Well, that's your kid, that's your child. And now that I have a 9-year-old, that looks a lot different than, 15, 20 years ago when I made those comments and not really having my own to understand. And having this vision as a family of what you want to see from those kids, where you want them to be successful. This idea of I'm trying to provide the best possible avenue for you to get a good education, to live your life and be a productive member of society. Getting derailed by a friend that is somewhere in the mix that just says, hey man,
Try this.
yeah, see what I've got for you here. See how this makes you feel. And again, those drugs, I was listening to a podcast on the way in this morning, and the way it was described on there, they were talking about opioids and mostly in particular painkillers, where it was the description that was given was, I can understand, this person's talking about saying, I can understand how somebody could get addicted to this because it felt like a warm hug, and it just felt like I was loved the whole time I'm on it. And then you think about what we just said about what does that kid need from that family?
Right.
What do they need from that mom or that dad, or mom or dad in a single family household or whatever?
Right. You just took me to a place when you said that to that I thought, like you said, the kids that are growing up where there's things missing, I mean, you can grow, but you can also grow up in the best home and have things happen.
Absolutely.
But things that are missing, and they put that drug in their body, and it's like, this is okay.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Yeah.
I can deal with it like this.
Yeah.
Life is okay like this.
Yeah. Before we sat down, I kind of used it as the example of like having cracks in your foundation, and all of a sudden this just magically fills all those cracks in, and
right.
this is what I've been missing. This is what I needed. Now I can, or it's always usually met with the idea, I'll try it, then I'm done. Right. I'm just going to try it and just see what it feels like, and I'm done. And then people get off into it and are like, whoa. Yeah.
And they lose the power to choose.
Yeah, yeah. And so that social stigma that gets attached with this, because I think that you're seeing right now an evolution. I mean, you've been in this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking back, like I'd commented on the Just Say No program, the Nancy Reagan deal, and we know where that went. And then we see this war on drugs kind of happening, on the backside with our government and everything else. But the reality of it is it's kind of like, as soon as something looks like they're making progress, there's always something else to fill it in. There's something to fill the vacuum, right? Like, okay, well, we've got a great, new treatment for this particular drug addiction or whatever, but then there's another one waiting to take its spot. So in 20 years, you'd commented probably most recreational, my guess is going to be alcohol and probably marijuana. I mean, those probably the most recreational, most commonly available, that, everybody, if you've listened, has heard, these are gateways, right? This is the gateway to the next thing. This doesn't become enough. Now what's next? But now, I mean, if we went back 10 years ago, the idea of saying things like painkillers, Oxycontin, things like that you're just like, not on the radar 10 years ago, now is right front and center, is met with, I come from the retail industry, so I'm very familiar with, I'm going to choose my words wisely here, because I definitely am not pointing back anything locally or anything like that. I don't want to insinuate that there's a problem locally here. But people who run around to doctors and get their prescriptions filled, and then, things end up in prescription pharmacies where they're, hey, I've got a prescription from this doctor and I'm filling it. I'm in mom's, sister's, brother's medicine cabinet. I'm, what's next here? What can I get my hands on? I'm filling this for, a friend, a mom, whatever. And I know that the regulations on that have changed a lot. They changed a lot when I was still in the retail part of that business. In how the government was trying to work to curb that, databases, national databases that will help link a lot of that stuff together. But it still doesn't stop it. There's still, where there's a will, there's a way, and so, and addicts are really good at manipulating not just people, but the systems to be able to get the things that they need. And if they can't fill this need with this, then again, what's next in line waiting? I started here, then I went here, and now I've moved my way to this other, more deadly, more powerful, more, unregulated. And so you see this climb in the community what scares the death out of me, to be real honest with you, is I know it's always kind of existed, at least in my lifetime, especially once I got to high school, that these things were things that are, I mean, alcohol is almost available in just about every household, right? And so, I mean, going to a refrigerator and grabbing a can of alcohol is not shunned societally as illegal unless it ends up in an underage's hand. Mm-hmm. And so as things become decriminalized, I mean, there's a lot of push right now. You're hearing these, it seems like every election there's a state that's decriminalized marijuana. And Matt, Oregon, if anybody from Oregon is out there listening, I'm not even sure what to say to Oregon right now. I mean, because they basically they just went, well, let's just do it all.
They're all legal.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's this thought process of, well, if it's available and accepted and it's not stigmatized as being illegal, then it's going to lower. Right. And I'm just looking at this like.
And the hardest thing is to deal with our adolescents that see all this and they hear, oh, it's medicine.
Yeah.
You know,
oh, yeah.
Even though their motivation's gone, they're dropping out of school, they're stealing money out of mom's purse to buy weed.
Right.
You know, they still think it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, and another thing I've gone through over the years is the fact that a lot of parents think it's okay to let their kids drink at home because they're safer at home.
Yeah.
And that's probably
if
true.
If you're going to drink, I'd rather you do it with me than to do it with somebody I don't know.
That's probably true. However, once we let them know, hey, their brain's not developed.
Right.
So we're setting them up. I think it's 14% each year that we can keep them from not drinking.
Right.
You know, we can lower 14% their risk of alcoholism.
Yeah.
So we know that nicotine primes the brain for alcoholism when they start young. Mm-hmm. But, you know, a lot of times the parents don't know any better. So we want to educate them. Hey, I hear what you're saying. It's letting them drink at home probably is. They're not on the highway.
Right.
You know, they're not out where they're going to have a car accident or be in a wreck or whatever. But they don't realize the brain isn't developed. So it's really priming it for.
And there's probably a weird connection on the backside with parent-child to go, oh, you know, this is a rite of passage. This is what my dad did with me kind of deal, you know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, and to think about how society, the evolution of how society is continuing to look at this. I mean, man, I think, again, 80s, 90s, just like, boom, you're getting locked up for everything. And now all of a sudden, magically, here we are, 2020. Let's just go completely wacko and just, you know, make it all legal and let's see how this program works. And again, this is the idea of there's federal funding that starts happening into these states. You are a part of that vein that needs that funding down from these programs for your program. But I mean, listen, man, I can't, you know, I'm picking up this pebble here at the bottom of the mountain, trying to move it over here so that it's in a good spot. And you guys are up at the top, jackhammering away, just throwing it all down the hill here at us. And I can't pick up faster than you guys are making more problems. And so locally here, and there's an underbelly here in the Bryan College Station area that, again, we live in a great community. You know, people, you know, I don't know. I've lived all over Texas. I've been in a lot of different places. I don't know that there's a better place that I could raise my kid. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not blind at the idea to understand that I live in a college town where, you know, these are kids that are spending, in some cases, their first time away from their families. Mm-hmm. And now I've got this newfound freedom. And man, you know,
a lot of binge drinking.
Let's hit it. You know, I mean, let's just live the college life. You know, I'm here to live my best years, and let's just hit it and get going. And then it becomes, again, it's a coping mechanism. Now, all of a sudden, you know, oh man, I just failed my test, man. I just want to go out and get lit and just forget about it all. And then that becomes routine, and that becomes weekly, and it becomes monthly, and then it becomes how you're living your life at that point. And so, and again, these are, as a parent, these are things that just scare me to death, because you can't You can't keep a rein in the whole time. And like you'd said earlier, I heard you make a comment where you were saying, if it's black and white in the family, then there's going to probably be like, there's like a slingshot effect, right? Like,
All right. We know that families that have absolutely no alcohol, no,
Right.
they're at risk also.
Sure.
And that's probably a lot of these college kids you're looking at that, oh, they're away from home for the first time.
Yeah.
Now I'm on my own. I can do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And like you
I'm
said,
an adult. Yeah.
right, I'm an adult. And like you said, it ends up on Friday nights. Then it's, Friday and Saturday. Then it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they're skipping class and starting to fail out of class. And, probably 2 out of 10 end up with a lifetime alcohol problem.
So, and again, I'm not a scientist, not an expert, not an actuarial or anything along these lines. But what I've heard is that the human brain is basically, it's still growing and transforming and everything all the way to 26. Mm-hmm. And so again, you're putting responsibilities on younger kids, thinking that, well, my kid's responsible. My kid's a good kid. My kid can make these decisions, and they know better, right? Probably. I'd hate to think how many times I've even said that in my own household. To go, my kid knows better. But this idea of invincibility, there's not this idea of long-term effects. I'm young, I'm healthy.
That won't happen to me.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, and then something, what you, I hate to say hope for, but what you kind of need to an extent is something in the landscape that shows the severity other than just the words. And maybe that's a family member. Maybe that's a friend. Maybe that's, somebody that's a mutual acquaintance in your family or whatever. And you can kind of identify then, like, listen, this is what I'm trying to help you with. These are some of the things we're trying to teach you. Let's take a look at what's being, what's transpiring over here in so-and-so's life. And how does that look from where you stand? And then let's transplant you into there. How would you feel if that was you in that role? And again, trying to even identify this with 20 plus younger kids, 20 plus year olds, it's just tough to get them to understand that because that's so-and-so. That's not me. That's just not who I am. That's not how I was raised. That's not how I was this. And again, it's just the idea of, I just need to take the edge off. I just need to relax. I just need a little bit of time. And so in a world now where we're in instant gratification, right? Like if there is one thing that I can tell you, and you need look no further than go to a restaurant, sit down and look around at the tables and find out how many cell phones you find out. And it's just this complete opposite spectrum. And everybody is complete, it's family time. Like you said earlier, it's family time and everybody's cut off from the world because they're all in their own little electronic world. And then somehow this is going to make everything all better for everybody. And so these digital devices, this instant on demand, I want it, need it, got to have it.
And it works.
I mean, think about it. You can get a movie on demand. You can get music on demand. You can get something delivered to your door today, groceries, whatever, Amazon, everything is at your fingertips to come directly to you, including a drug dealer.
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah,
so
I think families need to get back to basics. I've seen it in my own family. Here we're all together on a holiday and everybody's sitting back on their phones.
I know.
Nobody's saying anything to anyone, you know.
Or they're taking pictures and posting it. Look at what we're doing today.
Yeah, so I just think we need to get back to basics. There's no, you can be the best parent you can be, and I think being there for your child is the most important thing. Knowing what they're doing, trying to connect them, whether it be church and school activities and to that it's a safe place. Make it a safe place that you talk about your daughter's 9.
Yeah.
You can come and talk to us about anything.
Yeah.
If she knows that dad's gonna freak or blow, she's not gonna come to you.
Yeah.
You know, so make it
Have you
comfortable.
been talking to my wife? I mean, that kind of is, though. I mean,
But that's important.
yeah, I mean, that has been a topic of conversation. You know,
Right.
parents want to have high expectations for their kids. They want to set a bar for them, and the idea.
But we need to let them make mistakes too.
Oh gosh, I know.
I mean, they need to bang their heads.
Yeah.
And part of the enmeshment, you know, I don't, you know, if you know that word in the field of addiction, you know, when kids are little, when they're babies, they're kind of enmeshed with their mom or their caregiver. They don't even really know they're a separate being. But then when they hit up around 18 months or so, they start realizing, hey, I'm me and you're you. You know, well, when they start turning those young teen years, if you enmesh them to the point that they can't grow up and become independent, they're going to get sick.
Yeah.
They're going to reach for drugs and alcohol. So there definitely has to be boundaries. Kids feel more loved when there's boundaries anyway, even though they may not, well, my dad won't let me go, you know.
Yeah.
But they actually feel loved when there's boundaries. But if there's no boundaries at all and they can do anything they want, then that's not a good thing either. So we want to kind of be flexible, but we also want to make home a safe place.
Yeah.
You know?
But then you've got a parent out there that's justifying it. They're going, well, I'm trying to make my kid independent so that they're better adults when they get off on their own and everything. And then I mean, it's scary. It's scary how
it's very
independent
scary.
some parents are with their kids in that process. And so, but then you got the complete opposite. You got the other side
That's
of
why I'm
the
saying
helicopter
flexible.
parent that, you
Yes.
know, it's hey, my kid got a bad grade. Teacher explain why my kid got a bad grade. You know, I mean, and then those evolutions are all across the board, and probably more so now because, like we said, we've got all of the electronic dependence that happens at these younger ages. And then also on top of that, you've got social media, which is a direct influence. And we're putting in front of kids. You know, it's funny when you think about social media because nobody ever puts up their real stuff on social media. Like nobody wants to put up their drama, their dirty laundry or whatever. And if they do, they usually get blocked or you know, nobody wants to be a part of it. You know, so it's I filter my face. I'm gonna put up the pictures of my vacation. You know, well. 3 of those days didn't go real well, but I've got a great picture of the one that did, and that's what I'm going to put up.
Well, and then you mentioned earlier, you know, we want our kids to get the A. You know, what's wrong with the B?
Yeah.
You know, does our kids have to be perfect?
Yeah.
They need to know they're not perfect, and it's okay to get a B.
Yeah, and
You know,
a
like-
standard of I want you to be better than I was. I think the parent's heart's always in the right spot.
Right,
You
they
know,
do the best
but
they
it's
can.
it's you know, I'm where I'm at with what I was given, and it'd have been great if I could have gotten these other avenues.
And I want you to have that.
Right. And so we want to soften the blows. We want to, you know, where I took a fall as a kid off a bike, we want to, you know, layer them up with pillows and pads and everything else so it doesn't hurt when they fall. And, you know, so it is a unique process for a
But
parent to
sometimes
navigate.
it needs to hurt when they fall.
It does. So inside education for these parents and things like that, I mean, the best medicine for that child's soul is the idea that they're actively engaged and know what's going on with their kid. Not helicoptering, but know what's going on with their kid. Know their friends, like you'd said earlier. Know their friends' families.
And start at a young age, you know,
Yes.
instead of them being in their bedrooms on their phone, have them out with you.
Right.
You know, start at a young age to where you don't just go at the age of 16, hey, you're not going to be in your room anymore with your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, start at a young age where family time is important and, you know, that they know that they can come to mom and dad about anything that's going on in their life. They're more likely to come to you when there's a problem instead of reaching out to that group that does accept them.
And I think your programs of what you're referring to with family nights out at BVCASA is the idea that there are people who have experience. There are people who have been there, done that, got the award for it and everything else, who can be good sounding boards for parents who maybe are just flat struggling. I mean, they're just, I don't know what to do. I've done everything. And kind of when you've lived in those shoes and you hear kind of what that person's going through, it's good to have a sage there that can be on that other side just going, listen, man, it's not like this for this long. These are some of the things that I did that maybe you shouldn't do. These were pitfalls that I fell into, and having that wise voice there that somebody can just bounce off of. Nobody wants to make it public. It's like I said, you're not going to put it up on Facebook going, hey man, I caught my kid shooting heroin the other night, you know, and what do I do? I mean, it's this idea of, you know, isolation. I mean, there's a feeling of helplessness, of loneliness, like, you know, embarrassment. Again, all of those things that are stigmas that are attached to that there's avenues that are available for parents to be able to reach back and get help they need and advice. And so, so let's go a step forward. Let's move past college. You know, now we're no longer in the kid range. We're moving into young adults. These young adults.
You know, let me back up a little bit. When you talked about parents, I mean, I have seen so many parents that come in when their child is going to be in youth treatment that are at the end of their rope. These are good parents.
Sure.
These are parents that want the best for their child. And they're desperate. They don't know what to do. Like you were saying, there's legal charges. They're facing, you know, truancy.
Yeah.
The child's life's a mess. Therefore, the parent's life's a mess because the parent is super worried. And sometimes you just have to tell that parent that, you know, sometimes they have to bang their head to learn the lesson. And that's okay too. You know, and I always say, you know, you were talking earlier about God, but I always say there are no accidents in God's world.
Absolutely.
You know, and that things happen to teach us lessons. And I try to let moms know, you know, sometimes they're safer in jail.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to bail them out. Oh, no, I got to get them out.
Yeah.
You know, like you're talking past college. I got to get them out of jail. And I'm like, why? Why do you have to get them out right now?
Yeah, it's scary that when these kids become young adults, you almost bankroll them. I mean, if you're not intervening and trying to do something in the early stages, you're going to bankroll that kid for a long time, and that's going to be an adult that's still going to have an adolescent view of the world.
Yes,
that's still going to rely on their mom and daddy to be.
There's where the enmeshment is.
Yeah,
breaking away.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So then these are, again, we'll use the word adult, but these are adults that kind of go out. They don't function real well in society because everything doesn't work in the world that they're delving off into. They are losing jobs. They're quitting jobs. There's no commitment to kind of stuff. It really kind of sucks, I guess, the goal driving everything that you want to instill in your kid to try and be bigger and better than even what was before them before. But the idea also of sitting there going, okay, you know, I can't hold your hand at 30, 35, 40.
But you held it at 25.
Exactly.
You know, that's what I mean by at some point, you know, there's a couple stages in an adolescent's life and for literally an infant to the adolescent where they go through the stage of trying to become independent, and we need to let them make some choices so that they can mess up sometimes, you know, because we do have parents, like you were saying, enabling.
Yeah.
You know, we have parents that hold their hands so tight, and then when they're 40 years old, they don't, like, we have people in treatment that are 40 years old that throw plates across the kitchen when they're angry because they don't know any other way to do it.
Right.
You know?
And in a lot of cases, those people are, when they come to y'all and they're working their way through the addiction program and working to get clean, they're dealing with stuff that they've never dealt with. You know, feelings, emotions, you know, thoughts.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah, and then that surfaces back to the front, and really you start finding out that that's the whole reason that I numb all of this, is so we don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And so over 20 years of doing it, is there anything in particular now that you see that tends to be a driving force in? Like before we came on the podcast, we were talking about soldiers, you know, that are coming back from serving. And I've got a lot of friends that are in the military, a lot of friends who have served in multiple wars, multiple locations away from their families. The brotherhood, not knocking any of the women's sisterhood, but I mean, they know what I'm referring to there. And the idea that is their life, that is their identity. And then they come back to a more civilian lifestyle here that doesn't fit real well with what they've been trained up to do for X number of years, decades, even in some cases. And now all of a sudden they've got to turn around and figure out how to live in that world. And that world becomes almost as toxic for them as the world that they're trying to get out of. So, the 22 program that you see going around on social media, where 22 vets per day kill themselves by suicide. And so I'm just curious in that 20-year mark, because when I think back 20 years from when you started, you would have started right before 9/11. Mm-hmm. And right after 9/11 was where we really got off into it, right? And we got off into it at the name of America, safety, everything else, and people sign me up, man. Mm-hmm. Most united that America's probably ever been. People probably signing up in record numbers to go into the military. 17 years old signing up. Yeah, 16. Yeah, and just going, I'm going to serve my country. And so I'm curious if in that 20 years, in that change, do you see a lot of veterans who come back or that have served that end up at your doorstep as a part of the addiction process? Is it, and I know there's no good way to put 20 years in, because 20 years is just, it's like a revolving door, I'm sure. Right. Sometimes you see the same people over and over again. You trade this one out for this one. I'm sure there's a process there that, you're there knowing that you're making a difference in people's lives. But then you're also going, man, I'd really like the line to get smaller.
Yeah. When you put it that way, I kind of think about, we never give up. You never give up on a person, an addicted person, mm-hmm. because just because they didn't get it this time doesn't mean, it's kind of like a paradigm switch. If we could just move them over to the other side.
Right.
And we can. I mean, we can. We have a lot of people recover. But I think one of the saddest things was, I used to do groups at Brazos County Jail several years ago. I did groups every week there for years. And talk about breaking your heart. Mm-hmm. You see somebody that went off and fought in Iraq and Afghanistan and all this, and they're in jail because they can't stop shooting heroin. Right. And it breaks your heart. Yeah. It's really sad. We do see a lot of veterans that come through. And if you look at the recovery rates, I think based on PTSD and based on depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, you have to look at, a lot of people that have addiction is primary. There are people that just have addiction and that's it. However, there is a percentage of people that have more than one illness. Right. So the more that they have, the recovery is harder. Yeah. So we have to treat the whole person. So when you talk about your veterans, you're looking at serious PTSD issues. Sure. And that kind of thing, and depression and anxiety,
guilt. Lots of
guilt.
Yeah, you can just run the gambit for what these guys go through, mm-hmm. and all at the expense of, like I said, I'm gonna sign up, I'm gonna make a difference, I'm gonna serve my country, and then get to see the ugly behind all of that, and end up being in a situation where I didn't sign up for this, and how do I get these visions of my buddy losing his life right next to me? How do I get these out of my head? And
I think I will share my personal story a little bit. My son graduated at Consolidated at 17. He signed up, I believe, at late 16. And he came home from school one day and said, "Mom, I'm going to join the Marines." And I said, "What?" I don't know about that, Yeah. He said, "Well, if you won't sign the paper, I'm going at 18 anyway." So, we met with the recruiter and all of that, and he was in the delayed entry program his whole senior year. Did a little bit of drinking, his senior year.
Sure.
So, we tried to keep our hands around him the best we could. And then he did go. He left at 17 for boot camp, turned 18 in boot camp, and ended up stationed in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune. And boy, almost got out before he went to Afghanistan, but he did go.
Yeah.
And when you brought up the guilt thing, you had my son's name written right there, because when he came home, there was a strange kind of calmness about him. And then we watched that calmness turn to anger, to isolation, to some serious drinking, and I'm not gonna really put blame anywhere. However, he was given some medication. He was actually in a VA hospital going through alcohol detox at the age of 23, and they released him with medication that he should not have had, and he started drinking with the medication, and I found he overdosed, and I found his body. So I can't even tell you what that's like for a parent.
Oh yeah.
So when I see people come in without hope to our agency for help for addiction, I want to say, you can do this.
Right.
You can do this, but, you talk a lot about your little girl that's 9. As a mom, no, there was nothing we could do, We did tough love. We tried you can't even be around us when you're drinking. We did everything we could. We tried, I'm right there if you want help, you let me know this minute.
Right.
I'll be right there. And I was right there. Mom, I need to go to Temple. I need to go to VA. I need to go. And I was right there. Let's go.
Yeah.
But so we tried. Tough love doesn't always work. It takes me to a guy that is very deep into Narcan and the overdose awareness and all of that. And it's kind of like love them until they can love themselves. Sometimes we need to love them until they can love themselves. So I know with my son, the guilt was so extreme of the things he did over there that he spent the rest of his short days so mad at himself, he couldn't forgive himself. And literally, destroyed himself.
Yeah, they're met with a level of guilt, and that guilt is then butted up against, why am I here? Why was it me, as opposed to why wasn't I one of the ones that was next to my buddy or whatever? And the sad part about a lot of that is, and again, I don't want to point fingers. The military is a good place for people to have great careers, right? But let's be honest, there is a level of disposable. I want to choose my word very carefully here, but there is a level of we'll just say disposableness. That's probably not even a word, but that you go over, you do your time. Thank you very much, soldier, and have a nice life, right? And the things that they're met with, especially in battle, the things that they're met with and the things that they see are not things that people are wired to be able to see.
Well, they're kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of these, like you said,
19.
Yeah, we talk about the brain developing at up to 26, right? And so the level of coming back to civilian status, or maybe you're still you're stateside, but because I've known a lot of folks that are stateside that can't wait to go back because that's normal, right? And so these guys are sitting out here, and stateside for them with their family alongside of them and people who love them and they love them, but at the same point, they can't have a good understanding of that because they haven't done it. And so they don't feel like they've got an avenue to open up to. This is where that connection point to veteran becomes extremely important. And having somebody who's overcome it, somebody who's been right in the thick of it and overcome it and gotten through the other side to, like you said earlier, giving hope. It's the idea. I came from a funeral yesterday, and a comment that was made in this funeral was, how do I go on with this loss? And it's not so much met with this matter of, it's not how do I, because you can and you will, but it's just this huge question mark of just what now? How do I deal with this now with where I'm at? And nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to be faced with the idea that I've got a broken family member that I can't help them put the pieces together.
Right.
And then that leads to a tragic situation where, again, guilt just transcends. It just passes to the next. What could I have done more? Or what else could I have done? Or if I'd have known, or, it's a terrible place to put an individual, soldier, family member, or whatever. And so these processes of breaking all these things back apart and pairing them up and plugging them into something that gives them that hope, that gives them the idea, okay, this is not going to be the rest of my life, then that's, again, where BVCASA has the ability to be able to plug people into places that they need. Listen, I'm not a huge proponent of VA hospitals, and it's, listen, I do my best in these podcasts not to get political, right? But let's be honest. I mean, the money that goes into these VA hospitals is to Band-Aid a lot of stuff. It's not really to help in a way that needs to be helped. I have friends who are in very high places in the military who will tell you that the medical that they receive from there is...
Well, when you have veterans shooting themselves in the parking lot of the VA.
Yeah, after you've walked out.
Let's take a look at this.
After you've walked out of a session, So, I mean, the idea of that is we're willing to have the best military and the best fighting forces and everything else, but we have to be willing as a community to be able to support when they come back.
Absolutely.
And to pour into where that support is needed, right? And so... And then, again, this is just, like you said earlier, it's another layer. You got an addict that shows up on your doorstep who's like an onion, and you got to peel all these layers back. And it just makes it more convoluted and a lot more labor processed to get to those core things to then be able to work on it. You almost have to start middle going out as opposed to working outside in, because those things that are still in the core are really root causes to what's led them to your doorstep.
And you bring in all that up. It's a special person. When I look at like the counselors that work under me, it's a special person that can do this job each day and come back the next day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that was gonna lead into one of my questions.
Yeah, because this job is not about money.
No.
This job is a heartfelt job.
Yeah.
And when someone's sitting across that desk from you and they don't have any hope, and you can put 1 ounce of hope in there and see how, we see people come in, I mean, in the stages of change, pre-contemplation, there's nothing wrong with me, and their life's falling apart. They're, I mean, I've actually had a man one time with 3 DWIs, a swollen liver. The wife was gone, the job was gone, everything was gone, but it wasn't the alcohol, it was everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can get through that, I mean, who wants to be labeled that? Think about it. Who wants to, let's talk about stigma.
Yeah.
Who wants to be pregnant using?
Yeah.
Let's talk about stigma. So when I look at that person and we see them their eyes start, clearing up in treatment, and they start grasping recovery, and they realize, it took what I went through to be where I am now.
Yeah.
It's like a miracle. It's what keeps us coming back each day.
Well, and how are they going to feel when their own family has abandoned them, even in some cases? And
and most of them are.
Yeah, I mean, they've just given up. They're like, look, I've done everything I can. I can't do this anymore. You're tearing our family apart.
So we're all they have.
Yeah. And so strangers at that point at the doorstep, right? But just somebody that'll listen. That's just kind of where it starts at. But that's what I was going to ask you is so as a part of what you guys give back into the community and these counselors that are doing this day in and day out, how many of those counselors came from the program or came from a similar situation?
Most of them.
Yeah, and so they have I don't want to say a dog in the fight, but they definitely have a much better understanding. I mean, I can put a book in front of you. You can go to school for this stuff.
Right.
Right.
If you've lived it.
Yeah, but OJT, on the job training, when you're actually in the middle of it, in the fire, and you've walked out the other side of it,
right,
you've got a lot more experiences and a lot more to talk about, and can relate a lot better to people as opposed to, okay, let me see, chapter 56 says I'm supposed to do this.
Why they used to the point they lost everything.
Absolutely.
When their family has no clue, and their neighbors and the police and this one and that one. Nobody in their life has a clue why they're living their life that way.
Yeah.
But you know why.
So I'm going to bring you back around because I knew the story about your son, and we weren't going to talk about that on the podcast, but was that a push? Was that a push into this part of the business for you for joining BVCASA?
Well, he was actually 10 when I started working there, and he would be 31 this year. Yeah. But so not necessarily.
Yeah, but definitely maybe a more driving focus.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And so, and would you say that experience also is that veterans, when they show up at that doorstep and they're struggling with these addictions, that there's maybe a little bit more special place in your heart?
They're special people.
Yeah. So
I'll never let him be forgotten.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you shared that with everybody. And we were talking again before we came on camera, just of there are things that you're going to say, excuse me, in this podcast that are going to be valuable to somebody. And it's not just the idea of BVCASA being in the community to reach back and lend helping hands to get people into support groups and into therapy and into programs to help them get their lives back on track. But just like I said before we came on here, you got family members that are just like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what else to do. I have done everything I can possibly think of. But in coming on here and saying, 1 out of 10 people in the Bryan College Station area can maybe identify what BVCASA is a part of the reason for having you here and being able to talk about those services. And early education is great. It's the idea of just say no, maybe ramped a little bit different, and a little bow tie put on that ribbon a little differently. But the idea is addiction can take a hold at any given point of anybody's life. It's not just the idea that, man, I had a great childhood, and then here I am in my 40s, like you had said earlier. It doesn't discriminate. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't matter where you're at on the spectrum for any of those things. Right. And once it gets its hooks into you, it's really difficult to find a way off of that hook. And so, BVCASA being in the community and people who have been there, done that with an addict, whether it's themselves, whether it's a family member or whatever, when you go through it and you understand what is necessary to help people with recovery, then the idea of giving back, because one of the things that people can do here in the community as well too is volunteer and give of their time. And so again, that person who has that experience where their child that's an addict, their spouse, whatever, that came out the other side a better individual because of therapy, because of programs, having that individual there to talk about the hope on the other side of it becomes valuable to anybody that doesn't see hope. To people who are on this other side, it's literally being in the forest and not being able to see anything past those trees. Right. And having somebody on the other side going, I know exactly where you're at. Right. I know exactly from where you're at to how long it took me to get to where I was. And so, and everybody's journey looks a little bit different, and
but we all felt the same.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so the idea of somebody just almost looking in a mirror and just going, okay, I can be this. I can do this. I can be, I've always said that people's experiences become a chapter in a book to somebody else's world. Mm-hmm. It may just be, it's no big deal, man. It's just one of those things. But I've shared stories of myself with people that just find themselves in a hole that their idea is you've thrown me down this hole. I don't have a ladder. I've got a shovel, and I can keep going.
A little joke about that.
Let's hear it. I'm you
want to hear?
Oh yeah.
So a guy falls in a hole, and he's stuck in the hole, and a psychiatrist walks by, and he's yelling, "Hey, I'm stuck in the hole. Help me out of the hole." So he writes a prescription, throws it down in the hole, and says, take these and you'll get out of the hole. So he takes those, and he's still stuck in the hole. And then a pastor comes by, and he's yelling, help, help, I'm stuck in the hole. And he says, he throws a Bible down, says, read this and you'll get out of that hole. So he reads it, and he's still stuck in the hole. A recovering addict walks by, and he says, hey, help, I'm stuck in the hole. So the recovering addict jumps in the hole. He said, now what are you doing? Now we're both stuck in the hole. He said, it's okay, I've been here before.
Nice. Yeah. Listen, I can tell you, on my own personal experience, I battled depression at an age in my life, well before I had my daughter and early on in my married life. And you talk about the idea of, and in some cases it's just a passing conversation for people. And I did the whole, take a medication, this will make you feel better. I didn't like the way it made me feel. It really kind of, I used to tell everybody, the things that were in my head were like on a tape player. And it's just over and over and over and over. And what it kind of did was it just dulled the voice down on the tape player. It wasn't as loud. It wasn't as front and center, but it just kind of dulled it. And most of this related around my job. The thing that was crazy was I had this I referred to it as an impending doom. That something bad was going to happen. It's just a matter of what day and when. Somebody's going to walk into my store and it was going to be a disaster, and I was going to lose my job. And then, man, the monster in the closet just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, when I lose my job, then my wife will leave me, and I'll be by myself and I'll be flipping burgers. I mean, you can just write this horrible ending to the story. And I had an old boss that I just, for whatever reason, I picked up the phone and just said, man, I'm really struggling. I am struggling with getting my hands around this thing and trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't know what to do. And his comment to me was, tell me what's the worst thing that can happen to you. Well, I'd already written that script. I knew exactly what, that looked like. And so I start with my whole, again, lose my job, lose my wife, lose my house, lose everything else, and end up in a box somewhere. And he says, well, let's just start with the very first thing. So the worst thing they can do is they can fire you. They can't eat you, but man, I had that monster so big that I was convinced that would be what would happen, is that I'd literally get consumed by the monster. And it was at that moment, that statement alone, and we worked our way from there. And he goes, okay, so let's deal with that. If you lost your job, what would you do? I go, well, I'd have to go apply somewhere else. He goes, okay, and who's going to want a retail store manager that runs a $150 million building, in there? I go, well, I would think probably a lot of retail, places would want. He goes, so what are you worried about? Just go do the best job that you can do, and it's either good enough or it's not. And if it's not, then you just deal with that. And if it is, then we're not going to have this conversation again.
Right. He's so right.
And so it's a lens focus, right? My lens was very foggy, very cloudy, and I could only see just right here what's in front of me. And so having wisdom, people who've been there, done that, people who have probably, again, I'm sure he walked in my shoes as well too at one point, but being able to then focus further down the road and seeing that, listen, man, a lot of the stuff that you see that's as bad as it sounds in your world really hasn't even come to fruition. So let's deal with what's right here, and then you can have this vision of what's down the road just by walking the path first. But let's don't get off over here in the dirt and we haven't even decided to walk the path.
Well, see, that's what we have to, when we work with people in treatment, we have to keep them in today. Sometimes we have to keep them in the next 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
So if, yesterday's gone, you can't use yesterday, it's gone. Tomorrow's, we're not even promised.
Right.
What are you going to do this day?
Yeah.
And how big is that problem this moment?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about making it bigger than it really was, or, so let's look at what do you have to do this day to stay clean and sober? It's doable if we keep it down to this day. And as time goes on, we start stringing days together, and all of a sudden there's a joy if they work the program. And, we are a 12-step philosophy, so we recommend that they attend support groups so when they're finished with treatment, they have a place to fall.
Yeah.
They have that support already built.
Yeah.
And we have clients sometimes come back and speak to the group that already went through the program, that are doing well. So, and there's nothing like that person popping their head in your office 10 years later. Hey, when I was a juvenile in your program, I heard you.
Yeah.
I didn't take it serious, but I did hear you.
Oh, yeah.
And I came back, and now I'm doing well. So
Yeah.
you never give up.
You don't. And you hope that you surround yourself with people who can be wise. And if they're not around you, then there are people out there who want to do that.
Right.
There are people who want to be that voice in your life. They want to be the idea of going, listen, man, let's don't hit the nuke button here and destroy everything in the future that hasn't even shown up yet. Let's deal with where we're at, and let's walk it and see what it looks
twice?
like. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, so these people, again, like you were talking about, the staff members, the counselors, everybody that walks in there. I've had in my 20 years of running a Walmart store, I have counseled thousands. And thousands, literally.
Sure.
And my wife has said, you have an innate ability to be able to find the right words in the right time. That's great. And
you want a job?
But I'm not doing it to get rich. That's the deal. The idea, though, for me is, and I root mine back a little bit different. A little bit earlier, you talked about God, and so for me, the way that I view my life is that God put me here for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but I don't want to mess it up when it comes. And so maybe it's that moment right then and there to have that conversation with that individual for hope, for guidance, for recorrecting, for being, and I don't want to miss it. I don't want to be the one that when this is all said and done and we've cashed our chips in and I'm going, I know. And he's looking at me just sitting there going, I gave you one person and you missed them.
Wow.
And I'm just sitting there going, okay, I get it. So I try to treat every individual that comes to my doorstep in that fashion. And I'm sure that your counselors really have to live almost in that same world. And you really have to learn to be a dry erase board. They're taking in so much stuff and so much heaviness that's coming in. And then they got somebody else waiting. And so you literally got to stop with one, wipe it all off and go to the next one with a clear conscience of everything that you just finished off on the other one and not carrying over anything into that.
You definitely need to take care of yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And job.
Yeah. And it can definitely be, there were moments in those counseling sessions that I was like, oh my gosh, just please give me the right words that I don't screw this up, because I do not want somebody to leave with an impression that was not intended. And that's hard. But the one thing that I think I learned in that process is speaking from the heart and speaking from experience and giving people hope from that experience is always going to be valuable. Yes. And you provide these guys daily to people who can come in, people who have been there, done that, people who've seen hope and what it looks like and what the faces look like from start to finish, and being able to walk somebody down the road really side by side to give them that ability that they feel like they don't have. And getting them to understand, like, look, this is a process. This doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one session. There's no magic pill. There's none of this stuff. But we all have to walk a road.
It's a lifetime.
Yeah, we all have to walk a road. And that road is ever winding, ever changing. There's going to be things in the middle of it, decisions you have to make. There's easy ways out. There's hard ways out. It's something that's constantly being evaluated, like you said, on today's basis, not on what's going to happen tomorrow.
We don't know.
So, I love the idea that you've poured in 20 years of this. And I was telling you before you came in, it was funny because you looked shocked when I told you that I went on y'all's Facebook page and I saw your 20-year plaque that they had given you, and you're like, wow, you really have kind of done your research. But the idea of it's not emboldened in a plaque of 20 years. It's emboldened really in your heart of what you've given back in to this community, to the people in this community. The community needs more Cindys. The community needs more people who can step forward and lend a hand in an avenue or in a vein that they're familiar with. And there's a lot of folks that are out there. There's a lot of people who maybe they didn't show up at BVCASA's doorstep. Maybe they either figured it out on their own, or maybe they went to another program somewhere, a 12-step program, NA, AA, whatever. I mean, they figured it out on their own, but they're a walking testament to somebody who needs to hear it. And that is when you're looking, people who talk about volunteering, and especially in a program like BVCASA, it's kind of like you coming on the podcast. Oh, I'm so scared I'm going to say something wrong. I mean, you've done outstanding here, but again, it'd be the idea of, okay, well, I'd love to volunteer and be somebody for somebody, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if I have the ability to do that. And again, they just give us the time, give us the time to work with you, and we'll get you in to where potentially 20 years may snap by like that for you, and that you're excited and invested in the idea of helping people. And there's a special place for people that are doing that in their life. I mean, so that really is, when you talk about the mission for BVCASA being from starting early age to giving education, prevention, to maybe where we've missed them, and now they're right in the knee-deep middle of treatment, and then we've got to move them from treatment to recovery. And then you got to get them from recovery to day after day after day after day. And
stay motivated.
Yeah, and just keep tacking onto that. Give them some hope of something. That there is a program out there in the community that's willing to lend that hand out to people who don't know what to do. And not just in the avenue of just addiction with drugs, but in alcohol, in the idea of even, and I'm sure some of the things that you guys don't necessarily provide direct support on, probably have avenues of people who do, and probably have connections to people here in town that then, like you said earlier, we're going to do this evaluation. We're probably not the one that can help you here, but we happen to know, we happen to know this other group over here that's working with people here, if that's veterans, if that's mental health. I mean, that right. It's not just the idea that you show up on the doorstep and go, sorry, man, that's right. Not what we do, see you later, and you move on. That you're always going to be maybe a starting point, even in some cases for people, but definitely for some people, a lot of people, I imagine, show up on your doorstep don't feel like it's a starting point. They feel like it's their last point.
Oh, yeah.
And so, man, I'm just so grateful to have you guys in the community and have you, pouring in 20 years, and when you talk about, when we were sitting here before, she's like, I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to talk about. I said, if you've done this for 20 years, you're passionate about what you do. And if you're passionate about what you do, it's going to be real easy to have a conversation about all of this stuff. And look at how easy this was. I mean, we're an hour and 20 in. Wow. So the idea of pouring that passion into people, there's really not a better investment. I mean, if I'm going to invest, I'd rather invest in somebody than in something. Now, BVCASA is something that is really represented by some bodies. And so pouring back into that, and if you're out there and you're listening to this and you've got experience or you've got a story, I mean, because most of it all starts with a story. And so that's somebody's beacon.
His story.
Yeah, that's somebody's beacon somewhere for them to be able to guide people into a loving relationship with themselves first. Yeah. And they got to love themselves, and then we'll work on everybody else out past that. But most of these people that show up on your doorstep, I'd imagine loving themselves is probably not a high priority.
That's why I said we love them till they love themselves.
Yeah, and you got to love them into it.
Right.
And so, these services that you guys provide, and I guess the one little thing, and I kind of left off on this, so we kind of touched on it. I do want to touch on it real quick. Fundraising. So fundraising for BVCASA, you're supported by some of these levels of taxpayer dollars that are coming in. The United Way we talked about. We talked about private donations, but you guys also do fundraisers throughout the year as well too. COVID has knocked that down, I'm imagining.
Yeah, we have a big bowling tournament every summer.
Normally done out at Grand Station.
Yeah. And it's it's big.
Yes.
It's our biggest thing probably, and we didn't get to have it. So
yeah. And so again, this is just one of those years, man, that it's hit everybody. And it's a whole part of the reason why we started the podcast, to get people in here to talk about what it is that they do. And like I said, it's normally businesses, but even services here, like through BVCASA, it's important to understand that there are people who are still going to have to try and dig out of a hole this year. And funding for you guys becomes even more critical at this point, because you don't have those big events for those fundraisers that put money back into being able to put your organization at a top-notch level to take care of everybody. And it's not just a, hey, man, we need a hand-me-out over here. It's the idea that we're, I'm going to say
right,
something.
we literally start running out of funds toward the end of our fiscal year for treatment.
Right. And to say this, and my wife hates this, and I'm not a big fan of this statement, but to say we're all in this together, the idea of what you guys do is a part of we are all in this together, because
That's our community.
Yes, it is a complete, it's the bedrock of what it is that we want to live in, and we've got to be able to have the support to help the individuals that are here in this great community to be able to make them good contributors back to to make it an even better community. So I love where we're at. I love that we're a part of the Bryan College Station area, but I also love the idea that there are people out there willing to love on the people who need help in this area. We have just tremendous amounts of outpouring and support when it comes to people. And so I do want people to hear, again, that how y'all would normally look in a 2019, 2018 looks obviously a lot different this year. And so if there are people out there that can help and support, then by all means, definitely they can go to your website. I think there's a donation page on the website where they can give back. There's a page on there where they can volunteer. Everything is kind of available. And I'm sure, at the same point, whether it's Cindy that you're interacting with or whatever, I'm sure that there's somebody that is interested in talking to you if you're interested in doing something as a part of BVCASA to give back into the Bryan College Station area. And it's tough. This is not always a warm fuzzy volunteer side of everything, because you do get to see the ravaging that's happening in our community that kind of just gets pushed to the side and sometimes ignored and that kind of stuff. So it is, like we said, focusing a lens on a problem here in our community that needs a lot of support and needs people behind it who are willing to help those people who need that support.
And if I would say one thing to the community, it would be that we would less stigmatize this and look more, like for an example, we have a lot of pregnant women using, and then CPS steps in and takes the child. They come to BVCASA for treatment. They want to reunify with the child. And, what I would say to the community is, if you're suffering with this disease or someone in your family has addiction problems, call, give us a call, because we can help you.
Yeah.
And try to let go of the shame, the guilt, because that's what keeps pride, shame, guilt, all of those things keep people from reaching out.
Absolutely. And especially if that person
it's a secret.
I was going to say, if that person is fighting that battle publicly, meaning that, police have stepped in and it's made the local news or the local newspaper. And,
right.
Listen, man, people are judgmental. That's just how most people are built. Like, I can never imagine doing that to my kid or putting my kid in that situation, and that kind of stuff. And you're just, before we got started, you had said, this is a disease. This is not there's a lot of people that look at it as a choice, and that you should just be able to stop. And this should just be something that you should just be able to put the pipe down. You should be able to put the syringe down. And this is a disease that has to be unprogrammed in a lot of people's, like you said earlier, in their DNA. So when you look at it in that sense, this is a contagious disease because family members catch it, meaning, codependency and everything else.
It's the first time I've heard it put that way.
Yeah. It is, you're worried about COVID, and there's a bunch of people out there who should be worried about this coming into their household and again, spreading and having a devastating long-term effect, completely just destroying the bedrock of a family.
Why don't we bring light to the problem now, fix it so we don't have to do this?
Yeah. let's not put a stigma behind it of the idea of we just need to write that person off. They're just not a good person. I think behind everybody, you can look at every addict that walks in and know that that was somebody's little boy, somebody's little girl, and that, maybe they didn't get the fair shake that they were supposed to get, right? Maybe it was that they were born into parents who...
Do you want a job?
I don't. But, the idea of that is that we want people in our community to be understanding and not just be real quick to hang the tag around somebody and write them off. And it's hard to do, especially when somebody burns you time and time and time again. And at what point is enough enough? And man, I mean, what typically though tends to happen is they want that person to go seek the treatment, but they don't want to be a part of that process either. They just want, hey, here's the person at the doorstep.
Yes.
Return them to me when they're good.
Right.
And not really
we've had a lot of that.
Yeah. Not seeing them on the backside. So, understand again, BVCASA is a great organization out there that's doing a lot in the community. That is not, nobody's tooting trumpets for you guys, and it's not front page of newspapers, and it's not this, fireworks, look at everything you've done. But you guys have put people back into the community on their feet with tools to be good, independent, then giving back into that community to make it better and turning their lives back around. And you're doing that one individual at a time as they come in through the doors. And so if you can't, as a community, respect the idea that BVCASA is out there doing this day in, day out, holidays, weekends, there's no, sorry, we're closed this week. It's I've got a counselor's phone number. I can reach back to somebody when I need to. It's, sorry, we don't just work between this time and this time. There are people that are always there to lend an ear and to lend that experience to be able to help these folks. And so whether it's you or you have somebody out there in your family or people that that are struggling, please have them reach back to a resource like a BVCASA to be able to help and get them back on their feet. Because again, this disease is not going to cure itself, and we're not doing a lot of things as a country to help the disease. As we legalize and do everything else, this is just going to make this a standard, unfortunately, and it's not a place that people want to think about this being where I'm going to flip my next generation to, and so. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Loved having you on the show. I was so glad you came in today. I know that you were absolutely nervous. You did fantastic. And you represented BVCASA great, just like you have for 20 years. So we appreciate everything that you've been doing in the community and that your counselors have been doing. We just can't thank them enough. And I know, again, they're going to go unsaid, unknown on here. But again, if they're listening to this, I just want you guys to know you are making a difference, and we love the idea that you are pouring back into people who need people to pour into them. So, and again, if you're looking to volunteer, reach back into BVCASA, get a hold of Cindy. She will definitely be able to steer you in the right direction and be able to help you make a difference as well. If you've got a story to tell that needs to be in somebody else's ear, that can help them be better as well too. And what else could you ask for? Again, you just chalk those numbers up, and God again rewards the ones that help others first. So man,
can't keep it if you don't give it away.
Absolutely. So, well, again, BVCASA.com.
No, BVCASA.org.
I knew I was going to mess that up. So BVCASA.org. Got a lot of great information on there, a lot of drop downs about the services that you guys offer as well too. You guys are located at 4001 East 29th, Suite 90, kind of over there in the little shopping, I don't want to say shopping area, Carter Creek area, that's what it is. And they can find you over there. If they need to reach out, phone number that they can call.
979-846-3560.
Awesome. So again, thank you for coming in. Can't thank you enough for being here.
Thanks for having
Appreciate you coming in and talking about BVCASA today. And thank you for listening to us today. We appreciate you guys coming in and listening to another one of our great partners here. And we're just so excited and just proud to be a part of what you guys are doing every day. So
thank you.
Thank you much, Cindy. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.